Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, where we'll be talking about how AI is transforming creative production and immersive storytelling. Today's webinar is sponsored by Shutterstock Studios. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager here with Adweek's Content Studio, and I'll be your host. Today's presentation should go somewhere in the 30-minute range, after which we'll have time for audience Q&A. So if at any point you have a question for one of our speakers today, just use that Q&A tool right beneath the video window on your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Here at Adweek, we know the worlds of marketing and advertising move fast. And at Adweek's Brand Week event coming up next week in Phoenix, Arizona, we're going to gather CMOs, creatives, social media mavens, and industry powerhouses. And as a special offer for our Adweek webinar audience today, you can book your pass at brandweek.com, use code webinar20, and save 20% off. Feel free to grab all of that info. It's linked below in the event resources area. And today's webinar is being recorded. That on-demand recording will be available to all registrants. We will email you a link to that later today when it's live around 3:30 Eastern or so. As always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, definitely check out the full Adweek webinars calendar at adweek.com/webinars, which is linked below. Now, let me introduce you to today's speakers. We're happy to be joined by Drew Weigel, the Senior Director of 3D and Immersive at Shutterstock Studios. Drew leads all things 3D and Immersive at Shutterstock Studios, helping develop new strategies for emerging and real-time tech. His teams have won numerous creative and technical awards, including Webbies, Clios, Emmys, and more. We're also pleased to introduce Justin Weber, Executive Producer of Games at Shutterstock Studios. Justin brings over 20 years of experience in video games, augmented reality, virtual reality, and real-time simulation to his role at Shutterstock Studios, where he oversees the development teams, driving innovation and excellence in game production. All right, we've got a lot of great content to dive into today, as you may imagine from those intros. So let me bring Drew up on screen here to get us started. Welcome, Drew. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Danielle. Very excited to be here, and thank you everyone for joining us today and being a part of this. Justin and I have a lot of content that we're really excited to share with you guys, and I hope that this is enlightening in some of the ways that we're using AI to expand and build upon the production services that we've developed for Shutterstock Studios. So I'll start by saying that Justin and I are both evangelists for a lot of the things you're going to see here, but we're also very pragmatic about what AI can and can't do. So a lot of what we've developed are really designer and engineer-led solutions that we think can help scale an expansion in practical production applications. So really focusing on what works for our clients, what works for our productions, and what helps us scale to be the most impactful global studio we can be. So I'll start with that. For those who aren't familiar, Justin and I come from Shutterstock Studios. So if you're familiar with the stock side of the Shutterstock business, as I'm sure many of you are, Shutterstock Studios is the creative hub for all of our bespoke production. So that includes all of our creative content for our agency partners and enterprise clients, a lot of whom we act as a kind of supercharged global production studio. So that includes everything from ideation, pre-production, development, concepting, storyboards, through to production, a few methods of which I'll talk about here, post-production, visual effects, and now content distribution through our recent acquisition of Giphy, meaning that we can now deliver more or less soup to nuts on any creative brief, brand engagement, through to the Giphy platform, where we have over 1 billion users daily. So what we try to provide is an end-to-end service across a number of different verticals. Today, I'll be zeroing in on the 3D and immersive side, which includes games. As I mentioned, we're a global production studio, meaning we have hubs for production around the world, as well as embedded teams in a lot of the locations you see here, providing all of these services. So I won't stop that scrolling list, but like I said, we'll be focusing on 3D content, immersive production, and some of what we're doing in our virtual production pipeline. And I'll be diving in a little bit more onto that here for anyone who isn't familiar. But I'll start with AI generally. When I joined Shutterstock, it wasn't immediately clear to me what place a global stock provider might have in the world of AI. But with the shifting sea change of how that technology has expanded and grown in the last few years, that all fell into focus to me very quickly, because having a huge library of licensable data and content to use in training models means that Shutterstock has been at the forefront working with a lot of these different tech companies to develop models and AI platforms that can be used in a licensable and ethical way. So what that means is that all the content that Shutterstock licenses for data and training models, including the ones that we use ourselves internally, are coming from licensed content. That means our contributors are getting paid in what we think is the most ethical model of how this can work. So rather than data that's being scraped from the whole of the World Wide Web, we're making sure that all of our content is from licensed libraries for vector, video, image, everything through to 3D models. And that's what's being used with our partners on the tech side to train different models that are being used widely for commercial use cases. So what that means in the end is that you have safeguards. That means that whatever's being generated from that particular model can be used in commercial uses. So obviously the whole point of why we're here today is how do we use these tools to be able to deliver for what our clients need, for what our brands need. And that doesn't start without having a strong foundation that's both ethical and using licensed content. So we built this out and this framework to be able to do that. And again, I mentioned at the top that we're really focused on designer and artist-led solutions. That's where Justin and I come from. That's what our teams do. So we think about it from the practical application and also the application that allows us to deliver on what we need for our clients. So enough with the preamble. I'll dive into what we're actually doing in the practical use cases for all of that. I mentioned virtual production just as a primer for what we include under that umbrella. Shutterstock Studios does everything from fully 3D campaigns, some of which I'll show you here in a second, to building out virtual environments on LED volume walls, all of what they do for ILM and Disney productions like The Mandalorian, hybrid productions using real-time compositing on green screen, as well as traditional in-studio productions with visual effects and on location. For our fully 3D productions, we create a lot of branded content using digital twins, creating art-directed environments, creating assets for social campaigns, any number of reasons that we would use this method and use this pipeline. But where AI's really come in and supported that is our ability to ideate and our ability to generate and create new environments whole cloth using very particular and scripted prompt methods. So for all of these that you're seeing here, we're able to take a client brief. We're able to build and engineer a prompt working with our designers and art directors for something that's replicable. And that's the important key. A lot of the issues I think that people run into in using AI in production workflows is that you're unable to recreate or iterate on a design. And that leads to a lot of cul-de-sacs. It leads to a lot of dead ends. Here with this work, we're able to choose the right model, either one that's more photoreal, one that's better at illustrative content, one that may be a bridge between. And then we're able to design a prompt that gives us the right art direction, the right environments in a way that we can iterate on and continually design on. So for this, we may be using something like dramatic lighting, describing the environment, describing the surfaces. There's a lot of different ways we get to this through trial and error, and also use of large language models to be able to refine and elaborate on a certain prompt. But again, this is very art-directed, designed in terms of process. This is being led by our creative directors. The process of designing a prompt, I think, is as important as being able to art direct a scene. So once we've been able to generate a lot of backgrounds, we're able to treat that as a contact sheet. And then we're able to align on that with the client. We're able to put in digital twins or 3D replicas of products to be able to generate a lot of content in mass. So you can see the advantages of this for working with our global brands or some of our global agency partners to be able to iterate on a certain style or a look and generate a ton of content that's replicable, that's sustainable, and it's also something that's reusable. We can reuse and continue to iterate on these different styles, even building different AI models that are self-referential, if you think about it that way. Once we've got a look down for a brand, we can continue to expand on it. And that's true of not just the all 3D content, but the content that we shoot with live action talent. So whether it's a hybrid method of being able to shoot over green or blue, or being able to shoot on a large scale LED wall, we're able to shoot live action talent in a single location, bring in a lot of different talent, and then iterate on backgrounds and environments that we can put that talent in. Some examples of that let us art direct, whether it's stylistically as a reference to be able to then use with the art teams and the practical prop units, or as something whole cloth that we can then elaborate on, build into a 2.5D background or a fully 3D environment to use in those other production techniques. Which brings me to the LED volume work that we've been doing. If you guys aren't familiar with XR as a concept, it is exactly that. We're building whole cloth, real-time worlds using photoreal 3D in Unreal Engine, and then projecting that content on large LED volumes, which essentially act as a giant TV behind the talent. In a lot of ways, it's replaced green screen for us. It's not a entirely one-stop shop approach, but it does give us a ton of flexibility in terms of sustainability, locations, the amount of creative that we're able to get in one batch. There's a lot of advantages to this technique and a lot of interesting ways that we're able to work AI content into those workflows. Here's an example of the Lysol shoot that we did last year. You can see the screen in the background for reference, practical propping in the foreground. And our teams are building and designing these environments to specs for clients, and then doing that work bespoke. So one of the ways that we're thinking about AI-supported workflows there is either generating new environments that we can use for static shots, or something Justin will touch on a little bit more later, generative 3D. We've been working with NVIDIA over the last year to build out a model based on all of our TurboSquid assets. That's our stock content marketplace for 3D. Being able to build out a model that allows us to generate from text or image 3D models. So this is a huge time saver for us, and really an artist-led initiative to be able to reduce modeling time, enhance previs creativity, be able to use specific assets rather than relying on stock libraries or existing content. It just opens the floodgates for what we can do iteratively and creatively, especially when you imagine us designing sets to be used in this way. So that's a big boon and something that we're really excited about. Justin can show more of that and how we're working it into the game side of things in a little bit. But I do think it's a really interesting tool and one that we're very excited about. NVIDIA has been an incredible partner in helping us expand that. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a game changer in terms of what it can do for our 3D teams and production teams, applying it practically out in the wild. And that applies to some of the other tools that we're working with NVIDIA on. So this somewhat jarring GIF is our text and image to HDRI generator. So being able to use an existing image or even a prompted image to expand into a 16K full resolution HDRI panorama. Now that could be a background environment. That could be something that you can use as a skybox for a game or for lighting a 3D product. You start to imagine that once these tools are combined, you could use a prompt-generated couch in a prompt-generated environment, all placed on a background on a large LED volume to get a production workflow that allows you to capture any location, anywhere, all from the comfort of one stage. So then the implication starts to become scale. You start to be able to capture more and different types of content en masse and be able to expand those out across your campaigns, really planning for the most number of cuts once at the upfront. There are other interesting ways that we're expanding on that too, and this is a technology that I'm very excited about that we've really seen explode in the last 2 years. So what I'm showing here is what's called a neural radiance field, also known as a NERF. It's a fun name. I never get tired of saying it. So what we're doing in these instances is we're going out and capturing environments, actual real world environments using traditional photography, whether that be photo or video. And then we're running that through an AI pipeline with partners like Luma AI or Valinga to be able to generate a 3D environment, a 3D point cloud that captures all of the fidelity of that practical location to then be able to use in applications like Unreal or some of our 3D world building software. So then we can actually start putting 3D props in those environments. Again, whether we choose to put this on an actual LED wall and have talent move in front of it, or we choose to use it as an element within a game, this starts to limit the amount of time that we're putting into building bespoke environments, bespoke builds, all of that artist time that's spent actually modeling and building trees, iterating on those environments, and being able to capture real world content for our branded campaigns. So I think this is a huge game changer in what we will be able to do and are already doing, in fact, on sets. Here's one that we actually captured in the New York subway. You can already start to imagine some of the ways that we might be able to use this in places where it would be very difficult to do a live action production. A lot of these things combined are giving us the flexibility to think outside the box on our campaigns. Again, it's not about how do we use AI to generate something that's unimaginable. How do we use AI to help our artists scale or create things that wouldn't have existed or wouldn't have been possible through traditional methods? And I think that's where we're seeing the biggest impact in what we do for immersive storytelling, virtual production, all of these techniques combined. There's so many different avenues that we're able to daisy chain, and we're doing it live. We're doing it on set. We're doing practical R&D. Some of these things, they may seem far-fetched or cutting edge or impractical, unattainable, whatever you might think, but we're actually using them. I think that's the most exciting thing to me. Is this is an example of us shooting on set. That is an example of a radiance field being projected on the background of a apartment complex we captured in Florida. And then all of a sudden you start to imagine how even the mundane can be supported with these methodologies to be able to 1 second shoot a interior for a Lysol campaign, to the next being on a beach in Barbados, to being wherever else you can imagine, the pyramids at Giza. And being able to daisy chain those together gives us a ton of efficiency and a ton of sustainability in that we're not moving and traveling or affecting our production footprints that way. We're actually moving talent in, capturing across the wide swath of brands' needs. So even working within those bounding boxes, within those limitations, we start to really expand what we can do from a production sense. This last bit I'll touch on quickly because I do think it's a really fun example of how we're tying together all of these different technologies. There's so many disparate tools, and I've already mentioned, a half dozen here just now, in the ways that we are building out new models. We're using LLMs, we're using text to image, text to 3D. But how do those things all practically tie together? That's been a big focus for my team at Studios, is how do we start thinking about a world where these things can all tie together, can all be stitched together in one production method, whether enhancing our creativity or our scalability or everything in between. So this was a drawing that one of our engineers did there in the upper left of, I guess, a ray gun. I'll be generous to Steve on this one. But he drew that as an idea of what he wanted and put it in with some supporting prompts into our image to image generator, which we actually run on the Shutterstock site. So that's based on DALL-E 3, and it generated this image of a retro sci-fi ray gun in the middle there. He then took that image and put it into our 3D generator, our image to 3D generator, to get what was a pretty good approximation of at least a previs asset to start with of something that he just drew. End to end, that's about 10 minutes. So he was able to concept roughly off a loose sketch and then have a previs asset to start blocking with. So in a limited way, you can see how that can turn a napkin sketch into something like reality, at least for a 3D artist or a modeler. But I think it goes a little bit beyond that. This next example, he typed into ChatGPT a question or a prompt saying that he wanted to build out an MIB Twilight Zone style scene. Give me all the things that might be in that scene. So ChatGPT generates all of those prompts of things that you might want for a scene like that. Those prompts go into the text to 3D generator. And what he has in less than an hour is a whole pile, a whole kit of parts of things that he can use to roughly assemble that scene. Maybe not final production ready, but definitely something that he can work around and play with in a sandbox format. So he does that. He starts to build out what is a very rough blocking of a scene. You may be saying, okay, cool, great for previs. I kind of see where he's going, but Steve, you're not much farther than you were with the napkin sketch. I would agree with you, and so did he. So he ran that previs image back through our image-to-image generator to create what is essentially this still, which is ready to go from at least a concepting standpoint. All of a sudden, he has a clear vision of what he's going after and what he's looking to deliver on in production. And we take that one step farther. Using ControlNet or outside tools like Runway AI, you can bring that to motion. And then suddenly you've got something that is essentially a moving storyboard and starts to bring to life what your vision could be. And that's how we can daisy chain these technologies, and something that NVIDIA coined a no-render render. And you start to think about how we're only scratching the surface of how these tools will be used and how our artists are going to think beyond us in using those tools themselves. But in a practical sense, Justin or myself, we can sit down with our teams and start to be able to concept and start to be able to execute in a much wider way than we could before, and essentially turn the work of one engineer like Steve or one modeler into a fully functioning studio of their own. And I think that's very interesting. And I think that, to me, is, especially when it's done on a licensed model and it's done in an ethical way where the people whose art is contributing to those models are getting paid, you're starting to think of an ecosystem that is supporting the artist, built by the artist, and it is practical in its licensability, in its use cases, so that we can then take it and show our clients and be able to expand on that. So again, we're evangelists for what all this can do, but pragmatists in the most traditional sense. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it has to work under pressure, and it has to work under deadlines. So with that, I do want to leave time for Justin to dive into his stuff. So I thank you guys all again for giving me the time to show you some of this. And I'll kick it over to you, Mr. Weber.
Well, thanks, Drew. That was enlightening as always. And hey, everyone, I'm Justin Weber, and I'm here to talk to you about how we're adopting AI to push the boundaries in game development at Shutterstock Studios. But don't worry, what I'm covering is not only for game developers. It really has implications across all creative industries, including marketing. But before diving in, I'll tell you a little bit about our team. At Shutterstock Studios, we work on full-cycle game development, co-development, and porting, as well as art production. And for those of you that aren't familiar with these terms, you can think of full-cycle development like creating a movie from scratch. Co-development is like collaborating with another studio to complete part of the project. And porting is basically bringing an existing film to a new format. For example, we created Perfect Match for Netflix, a game where the player becomes the protagonist of an interactive reality TV show. It's a narrative adventure that immersive fans into the IP's world, and every decision they make impacts the story in significant ways. If you want to try it out, you can download the game from your Netflix mobile app. And just to note right here that Perfect Match used a traditional development process without AI assistance. That being said, let's dive into how we're experimenting with AI in game art production. And more importantly, how do these same tools, how can they inspire and impact marketing campaigns? So from the angle of game art, we can start with concept art, which is one of the earliest stages in game development. And AI can help us bring ideas to life quickly. And there's also game prototypes, where AI assets can help us visualize the game mechanics in environments for early testing. And finally, production assets, the ones that actually make it to the game. So once the concept and prototype stages are nailed down, AI can help us accelerate the creation of game-ready content. So we started using AI and started experimenting with it back in 2023. And we started with game concept art for our game pitches to our clients. Here's an example of our first game pitch using AI. It was a ranching strategy game set in the Wild West. AI allowed us to generate these compelling visuals quickly, and it helped us communicate our vision for the game more effectively to our partners. And the process began with collaborating with our AI team. As Drew mentioned before, we have prompt artists, which are essentially people that are great at crafting these text descriptions that guide AI to generate these images. For instance, in this example, I wanted an art style really similar to Fortnite, stylized and cartoony, but with a dark atmosphere. And the prompt artist was able to create a prompt that generated that style of art consistently and allowed me to iterate rapidly. Once a prompt artist nails down the art style, you can take it further by adding creative direction to those text prompts. So for this horror theme game, I added specific scene descriptions of what I wanted to see in this image. Who are the characters? Where were they? What were they doing? What was the emotion that was there? And AI was able to capture what I had in mind while still producing that consistent art style. And this process of art direction with the AI is really similar to how we work with concept artists. But with AI, we can iterate even more rapidly. In 10 minutes, I could generate multiple versions of an idea instead of spending days or weeks with the traditional methods. This saved us a ton of time and helped us move more quickly through trial and error. Another point is it's also incredibly versatile. I could switch between styles like these Minecraft-inspired images with ease. Another really powerful use case in gaming is for rapid prototyping. So AI can help us to create game prototypes by quickly generating placeholder assets to test out the core mechanics. And by placeholder, I mean it's a piece of art that we use to test the game, but won't make it necessarily into the final game. So the goal here is speed. We want to test whether the game is fun before investing a lot of time in final assets. And AI is actually well suited to help us move more rapidly. To give you a bit more context, here's a concrete example of what a game prototype is. And this is from Riot Games. On the left, we see what was called the Bacon prototype from 2012. It's rough, but just enough to validate the game mechanics and the fun factor of that game. In the right, we see the final product, Legends of Runeterra, that was released in 2020. You'll notice that almost all the visuals from the prototype were replaced in the final version. So while this process is necessary, it's not exactly what you call efficient, which is why AI can be so valuable in this prototyping stage. With tools like Shutterstock's 3D API that's powered by NVIDIA Edify, we can rapidly create 3D art from game prototype that just requires a little cleanup from an artist. Once again, the goal here isn't perfection. It's about getting something functional quickly to test the core gameplay. And that frees us up to focus on the creative work later. AI-generated 3D assets can really take us a long way, especially in these early stages of development. But AI isn't just for early stages. We're finding that it can also augment the production of final assets. While it's not a magic solution that's going to solve all your problems, it significantly speeds up processes and gives the artist more room to focus on creative direction and exploration. For example, AI can help an artist explore multiple design ideas quickly, allowing them to really funnel their creativity in the best direction that they've assessed. And touched on by Drew, image to 3D is incredibly powerful. So we can take a piece of 2D concept art, whether it's created by an artist or generated by AI, supplement that image with text descriptions, the text prompt, and use AI to create assets that follow those design guidelines. While it's not a fully automated process, it does allow the artist to get a head start and have AI-generated models that then plug in directly to industry standard tools for them to refine. Another part that I find very exciting too is creating simpler assets. This may not be sexy, but you need to do this type of content in a game. And furniture that we see here is a good example. It can be time consuming, but from an artist perspective, it's not the most rewarding and it can be a little boring. But AI handles these quickly. This gives the artist more time to focus on the complex and rewarding aspects of asset creation. And for my final example, let's look at how AI can give you a wide funnel for idea exploration, something that's incredibly valuable to both game development and advertising. Here we're looking at some character concept art. It was created by AI. In game development, I should say that character concept art is kind of an early stage where artists visualize the appearance, the personality, the style of characters. And that essentially becomes a blueprint for a 2D or 3D artist to create the final game asset. So while generation of this image with AI was really fast, it didn't quite capture the natural touch and polish that we'd expect from a human artist. So we tried a different approach. We provided the same description to a concept artist who then created these designs. The artist's work captured the style and details much better, and that was what we were looking for. It took about 8 hours for the artist to illustrate these, but it was worth it to get the quality we needed. In this example, it kind of shows that while AI is incredibly useful for rapid idea exploration, it still requires an artist or creative to really bring these concepts to life. So while we were happy with the artist's rendition, we went back to AI for a different task, and that was generating more ideas and variations based on the hand-drawn concept art. This time we used the artist design as a guide for the AI to create new versions with different clothing, hairstyles, and accessories. This allowed us to create hundreds of variations rapidly. The AI gave us multiple options to choose from for the final design, speeding up the creative process considerably. And the artist's guidance combined with the AI's rapid output really gave us the best of both worlds. AI tools, at the end of the day, are not just about efficiency. To me, to Drew, to our creative teams, they're about expanding creativity. Whether you're developing a game or crafting a campaign, AI gives you the time and the freedom to be more experimental and bold in your ideas. Think of that wide funnel that we talked about. AI lets you try new things, explore different visual styles, and quickly test what resonates. It lets you iterate quickly, adapt to feedback, and scale creativity in ways that weren't possible before. And to wrap up, AI is really transforming how we create, whether it's a game or a marketing campaign. It's a tool that empowers us to focus on creativity, scale our efforts, and deliver better experiences faster. From our perspective, AI isn't replacing creatives, but it certainly is amplifying what we can do. It's about exploring more ideas, pushing boundaries, and ultimately creating meaningful experiences that are engaging for our audiences. And that's something that applies both to gaming, advertising, and all immersive activations. So I hope that you leave here with some inspiration on how you can use AI to supercharge your own creative process. Danielle, we can move into questions when you're ready.
Great. Thank you both so much for those insights. So many cool examples too. I'm sure we have a lot of questions from the audience here. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. Audience members, I did want to let you know that if we do not get to your question today, we always make sure they get forwarded over to our speakers so they have the opportunity to reply offline. Just a couple of other quick reminders here from Adweek. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand later this afternoon, so keep an eye out for that email. All right, let's jump in here with some of these questions. So our first question, I think you touched on this a little bit throughout the presentation, but would love to dig in further. Someone asks, how do your teams adapt when AI tools aren't necessarily hitting the right level of quality or solving the problem the way you want them to? What's your strategy there?
I can take first stab if you like, Justin.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we have found, and we have all probably learned together, everyone on this call, is that not all AI tools are created equal, and not all processes are meant for AI, if you want to think about it that way. We do a lot of R&D and a lot of vetting for what processes work. And one of the big advantages of studios and how we work is that we are backed by the bigger Shutterstock entity that has put a lot of time and R&D and effort into seeing what works for different models. So we stand on the shoulders of giants a little bit in that way. But I think it's also stress testing. You know, what we try to do is look at different tools in a vacuum and say, does this meet the demands that we know we will face in a client project? I think that's really the true North Star is, if I need to iterate on this, will I have the flexibility to do that? If I try to push the quality of this, if I try to change this in a way, will this AI model be able to adapt for that? And the answer in a lot of cases is no. So the examples that Justin and I are showing are really the ones that we've found where it does support us, it does support our teams, and it does make that possible. Justin?
Yeah, I mirror a lot of what you said. You know, AI is a really powerful tool, but it's not the perfect solution for every problem. When AI outputs don't meet the desired quality, we still have artists and developers that are there to step in to refine and polish the results manually. So if AI isn't solving the right problem, we quickly adapt by shifting to more traditional workflows.
We are the most upfront people you will meet about that. I think being honest with your clients and being aware upfront is a big part of that, because we all know what it's like to walk back expectations.
Absolutely. And it's still the creative process, right? The creative process is the creative process. Test and iterate. If it doesn't work, we'll try again, right? So appreciate all of those insights. Thanks for walking us through that. So Immersive production has spurred some questions here from our audience in terms of how all that works in the applications as well. So I'm going to lump together two questions here on that. First one is, can immersive production be scaled for different budgets and project sizes? And what is the typical timeline for that sort of production?
Ooh, the classic, how big is a box question. The answer is yes. I think, using virtual production techniques, we see a lot of efficiencies. And if we work with our clients and plan around what type of content they're looking to capture, how they want to capture it, there's a lot of ways that we can scale to different budgets. So to that question, I think most of our typical, VP timelines are pretty comparable to what we see in traditional live action production. There's a little bit more upfront, but usually I would say around 3 to 4 weeks of pre-production on the commercial stuff that we're doing. And then we capture it all on camera. So whatever your post timeline is for editorial and visual effects, that's all pretty standard.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. On the game side, the average project for a mid-size experience, like an interactive branded environment, could be 3 to 6 months, and up to 12 for larger, kind of more complex, full-scale games or VR. But ultimately, we adapt the timeline based on the project size. And, in terms of can it be scaled to different budgets? Absolutely. Smaller budgets, we can use existing assets, we can use streamlining workflows to still have impactful results. And for larger ones, we can develop custom assets and complex environments, interactive elements. So really, we try to offer the flexibility to tailor the experiences to any size, ensuring that it's quality regardless of the budget level.
Yeah, great to have that flexibility and scalability. Awesome. We have a question here. Speaking of existing assets, related to the prompting we were talking about today, which seems like such a crucial element of getting the value that you need out of some of these tools. Someone asks, does Shutterstock have reusable detailed prompts for creative that would be available for purchase? And if not, I'd be curious if folks are looking for that kind of thing, where you'd recommend going for it.
Ooh, that's a fun idea. Prompt marketplace. I like that. We do a lot of custom prompting for clients on the studio side. Shutterstock has an AI platform where you could go and play around, create your own prompts, do all of that. In terms of building out specific reusable prompts, that's stuff that we do on the studio side. Mostly because we're trying to build out large scale libraries of content, like whether it's backgrounds or whole cloth photo libraries. Some of the examples I'd showed, those are things where we built out very detailed and involved prompts with a lot of creative feedback from our clients, a lot of work from our designers and art directors to make something that kind of operates like a Mad Libs in a way, to be able to work in that sandbox and be able to generate a lot of stuff that feels like it's of one piece. And we also are starting to work with clients who maybe have a lot of existing content and want to train a model based off of that existing content. To be able to do that is in its way of generating its own prompts. So we don't have a ready-made marketplace. I wish you could go on and grab a bunch of your own prompts in a different style. That may be something that we eventually do, but right now it's all bespoke by brand for our studios clients.
Got it. Thanks for walking us through that. So we have a question here, Justin, about Shutterstock's gaming journey at large. So I'd love to throw this one to you and get your thoughts. Someone asks, how exactly did Shutterstock get into gaming? Why did they get into the mobile gaming space in the first place? Just curious to get the background there.
Absolutely. Well, there's method to the madness. Shutterstock has always been about empowering creativity through content. There's hundreds of millions of licensed assets that are available, and it provides content for a variety of media, whether it's advertising to film and beyond. Shutterstock Studio kind of builds on that with a bespoke custom content for clients. So the decision to move into gaming is a natural extension of that mission. The games market today rivals media like TV and movies, both in size and the creative scope. So we just saw a huge opportunity to bring the expertise we have in content creation to the gaming industry.
And it worked.
It worked, yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for questions for today's session. I would like to thank our speakers, Justin and Drew, as well as our sponsor, Shutterstock Studios. Some final reminders here from Adweek. Make sure you download, make sure you check your link for the email that will come out later today with that on-demand version. We'll send that around 3:30 Eastern, so keep an eye out for it. As always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, make sure you check out the Adweek webinars calendar to learn more about our upcoming events at adweek.com/webinars. As I mentioned, we're going to make sure any questions we didn't get to today get forwarded over to our speakers, but if you'd like to reach out directly, you can go to studios.shutterstock.com to contact them, but no worries, we'll make sure they get all of your questions after the session, even if we didn't get to them today. You can also find similar content at Adweek's Brand Week event from September 23rd to the 26th, just next week, where you'll be able to hear from CMOs at brands like MasterCard, Wendy's, Crocs, Molson Coors, and more. Be sure to take advantage of our special webinar offer using the link below with code webinar20 for 20% off your pass. Again, a huge thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our audience for joining us live today. And as always, we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar. Thank you all so much.